Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to 1 Kings, chapter 21. There are 43 verses in this chapter. And just before we continue on, I want to reiterate that chapters 20 and 21 they're switched up in the Masoretic and the Septuagint, so you will notice that we're actually going to be in chapter 20. It's going to say chapter 20. It's actually chapter 21 in the Septuagint. So again, there are 43 verses. Verse 1, there is a continuous difference of the son of Hadad and Ben-Hadad. Verse 3, there's an addition of the goodliest. The goodliest. It's actually a real word. It is an Old English word. The modern edition would be the best. Verse 5, an addition of although I have sent unto thee. In verse 6, the desirable one objects of their eyes, or all the desirable objects of their eyes, versus pleasant in thine eyes. Okay, looks like I added the word one for some reason. Verse 7, take notice and consider, versus mark, I pray you, and see. So the difference is in the Septuagint, think on this, versus stand witness. Also in verse 7, I have not kept back from him my silver and my gold, versus I pray you, and see how this man seeketh mischief. For he sent unto me for my wives and for my children, and for my silver and for my gold, and I denied him not. So the difference is the Septuagint refers only to the silver and gold. In the Masoretic, it refers to everything, including his wives, children, and so on. Verse 10, if the dust of Samaria shall suffice for handfuls, and the word is shoal for handfuls, which means hollow of hand, for all the people that follow. Oh, okay, you know what? I went ahead of myself. Okay, in the Masoretic, I should say in the Septuagint, it says, if the dust of Samaria shall suffice for foxes. So you have to see the original Greek to see what that means. What is foxes? To all the people, even my infantry. Versus, if the dust of Samaria shall suffice for handfuls. The Hebrew word is shoal, which means hollow of hand. And then it says for handfuls, for all the people that follow. The word for follow is regel, which means foot. That foot me. Okay, so let's look at the original Greek. Okay, so the original Greek word is allopex. Greek Strong's entry 258. Allopex, which is, it means a fox or a metaphor for a sly or crafty man. So let's look at this using these definitions. If the dust of Samaria shall suffice for sly or crafty men, to all the people, or for foxes. So yeah, they are significantly different, those two meanings. Verse 11, there's an omission of let it be sufficient. Let it be enough. Let not the humpbacked boast as he that is upright. In other words, do not think you are strong when you are in reality weak. versus let him that girdeth on his harness boast himself as he that putteth it off. In other words, you have a restraint. Do not think that you do not have a restraint and are free. Do not think you are free. You have a restraint. Okay, so that is significantly different as well. Verse 12, tents versus pavilions. There's a, it says here, form a trench in the Septuagint. The footnote reads, build a mound or fortification. And they made a trench against the city, versus set yourselves in array. And they set themselves in array against the city. So, in other words, coordinate and make a trench. Simple. Versus attack them randomly in a disorderly way. Modern equivalent, guerrilla warfare. 14. Whereby versus by whom. So how will this come about versus who will perform this? Who will do this? Continuous difference of the heads of the districts versus the princes of the provinces. And then it says begin the battle versus order the battle. So initiate the battle versus organize a strategy or battle plan. Verse 15, numbered. And this is interesting because the footnote reads in the hard copy, reviewed. Okay, verse 15, 230 versus 232. And a significant difference here, every man fit for war, 7,000 versus all the people, all the children of Israel. So including men, women, children, old people, no one is exempt. Whereas we can see, no, it's every man. And not just any man, but those who are fit for war, those who are prepared for combat. Okay, that's verse 15. Verse 16, he went forth versus they went forth. Sukkoth versus pavilions. His allies versus that helped him. Verse 19, let not the young men versus so the young men. So, in other words, orders. These are orders in the Septuagint. A commandment is given versus the narrative. It's part of the narrative in the Masoretic. Verse 20, smote each one the man next to him, and each one a second time smote the man next to him, versus, and they slew every one his man. Okay, on the horse of a horseman versus on the horse with the horseman. So alone versus accompanied by or with the horseman. First big difference is in verse 21. It says, took all the horses and the chariots versus slew all the horses and chariots, or smote. So taking them as a booty versus killing them all, killing even the horses. There's an addition of the Syrians. Verse 22, observe versus mark. Omit, there's an omission of the son of Hadad. Verse 23, the God of Israel versus their Elohim. Mountains versus hills. There's an omission of, and not a God of valleys. That's an important detail, actually. If we should fight against them versus let us. So it's more definitive in the Masoretic, but in the Septuagint, it's more open to them making a decision if we do or if we don't. Verse 24, send away the kings, each one to his place, versus take the kings away, every man out of his place. So, in other words, send them back to their respective place, versus remove them out of their respective place. Verse 25, we will give thee another army. Footnote reads in the Greek, change. We will change an army. Versus, and number thee an army. So the servants of the king of Syria will supply you a new army, or change an army for you. But in any case, it's a new army. Versus, you count a new army. You're the one. Let me repeat that. I'm kind of stammering. You count a new army. You are the one responsible to replace your new army. We're not going to supply you an army, in other words. We shall prevail against them, versus surely we shall be stronger. Their voice, he hearkened to their voice. So the servants of the king of Syria, their voice, the footnote reads in the Greek, his voice, which makes no sense because they are plural, not singular. Okay, verse 26, reviewed Syria, which kind of lines up with the previous instance where it mentioned numbering. I think review is the same word that was used, if not mistaken. Okay, might have been, I can't remember. Oh, numbered. Yeah, reviewed. So reviewed. It's interesting that reviewed is used here by the translator rather than numbered. So did King David also review his army, or was it something more than that? Versus numbered, which means to visit, number, or seek. Verse 27, and came to meet them. Versus, and were all present. Verse 29, the battle drew on. Versus, was joined. The battle was joined. In other words, the battle continued on, versus it came together. Verse 30, into a closet, versus into the city, into an inner chamber. Okay, so he is in a closet versus into the city. It doesn't make any sense. Why would it be the city? Let me look that up in the Hebrew just to understand why did they use city? Why is it a city that is inside an inner chamber? How can a city be inside a house? Okay. So the word is 5892, ear. City, town, excitement, anguish. So no, it doesn't make sense. They came into the terror. They came into the city, into an inner chamber. So the inner chamber is in the city, but in the Septuagint, it is not only in an inner chamber, but it's more specific as to what part of the inner chamber. It is a closet. All right. Verse 31, another significant difference. It says here, he said to his servants, versus his servant said to him. So it's a he said, they said situation. No, it's he speaking. The son of Hadad speaking to his servants. I know versus we have heard. Big difference. It says our souls versus thy life. So he's thinking about not just himself, but also their lives. Verse 32 confirms this. It says, let our souls live versus let me live. So Ahab is saying that Ben-Hadad is his brother. It says, does he yet live? He is my brother, versus he yet alive? He my brother. So it's more clear in the Septuagint. Verse 33, and the men divined and offered drink offerings. And they caught the word out of his mouth and said, Thy brother, the son of Hadad. Versus now the men did diligently observe whether anything would come from him, and did hastily catch it, and they said, Thy brother Ben-Hadad. So, in other words, the Septuagint is saying they did perform sorcery / divination in order to get a word or an answer. However, in the Masoretic, they did not do divination. They observed. They were just watching, but did not perform some sort of sorcery or witchcraft. Was it the men of the son of Hadad or the men of Ahab or Ahab? Verse 34. Ahab made a covenant with Ben-Hadad. Okay, so that's just something I wanted to point out. It's not so much a difference. Verse 35, by the word versus in the word. Verse 37, smote. Smote means to strike, not kill. So a lion shall smite thee. So a lion struck him. Okay, he said to him, because you have not listened to the voice of Adonai, therefore, behold, as thou departest from me, a lion shall smite thee. And he departed from him, and a lion found him and smote him. So he was hit. He was wounded. He finds another man and says, smite me, I pray thee. And the man smote him, and in smiting wounded him. So notice, he's still alive, apparently. It seems like a certain man, okay, hit me. Okay, the man would not smite him because you not hit me. Okay, so he asked a certain man, and a lion found him and smote him. But my assumption is that he died, this individual that he asked to kill him. So he said, here, smite me. Okay, wound me, basically, not kill me, but hit me. He finds another man, says, hit me, I pray you. The man hit him, and in smiting wounded him. Okay, so verse 38. The prophet went and stood before the king of Israel. Verse is waited for. So he's waiting in the Masoretic, but in the Septuagint, he's not waiting, he's standing in front of him. And it is notable that he bound his eyes with a bandage, which is probably related to being smitten, being wounded. So he was wounded on his eyes. Verses, and disguised himself with ashes upon his face. So this has no relation, no connection to the prophet being smitten. Verse 39, and it came to pass as the king passed by that he cried aloud. Okay, I'm just looking at this part says keep his man, or is it keep this man? I think that's a typo. Let me double check in the hard copy. Okay, I don't know if we recorded all of that. Okay, hold on. Okay, we are back. That is not a typo. I should say it in the hard copy. It is this man, so that is a typo from the website, not in the original. Verse 39, continuing on, it says, war. Thy servant went out to war. Footnote reads, army of war, meaning he did not go to the forefront of the battle, but he was met with the forces, or I should say he met with the forces. He didn't engage in battle. He simply joined the army, but did not go out to fight. Okay, so that's the footnote. It says, thy servant went out to the army of war, not not in the heat of the battle. That's an important important detail to recognize. Verse 40, a significant difference. It says, looked around versus was busy. Okay, he was looking around and that the man was gone versus he was busy, so he was occupied. So that's why he was gone, because he could not pay attention to his surroundings. But no, in the Septuagint, he was observant. He was not distracted. Okay. Behold, thou hast also destroyed snares set for me, versus so shall thy judgment be thyself. So shall thy judgment be. Thyself hast decided it. Okay, that is significantly different as well. What is the difference? So he's saying you've set traps for me versus so you're going to be judged. So those are two very different things. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, verse 41. Took away the bandage from his eyes. So he took away the disguise, you could say. Versus he took the ashes away from his face. So it's important to remember that a bandage is opaque, but ashes are easy to see. You can see through ashes and see a recognizable face, a face that is distinct with ashes on it. For example, if I were to, let's just put this over my face. If I were to put this over my face, covering my eyes, it's hard to see who I am, right? Even like that, it's hard. Maybe they all have distinct features or common features, so maybe they have the same kind of nose to demonstrate. But if I'm just putting ashes on my face and I just rub some ashes, you could see my eyes. They're still discernible. You can still see my features, or in this case, the prophet's features. So that's verse 41. Okay. Verse 43, the last verse of this chapter, second last chapter of this book. Confounded, it says here, confounded. The king of Israel departed confounded, so confused, and discouraged, versus heavy and displeased. So not confused and not discouraged, but just dissatisfied. He was not satisfied. He was discontent, and he was heavy, whatever that means, heavy. Maybe that means discouraged, but let's just look that up in the Hebrew. So kar, which means stubborn, resentful, sullen, rebellious, implacable, cannot be placated, sullen. There's a lot of definitions there. It's kind of like a bingo card. It can mean everything and anything. I'm not trying to criticize that, but it is very vague. It's not as specific as confounded. So confused and discouraged. It's clear as day as to how the king of Israel felt. But heavy and displeased, well, okay, that you could make an argument and say, okay, he was heavy of heart. He was not happy. But to say, okay, I'm heavy of heart and I'm not unhappy, you can get over that. But if you are confounded, you're confused and discouraged, that is harder to overcome. You could even say, in our modern vernacular, his mind was chaotic and he was depressed. You could say even to that degree, perhaps. But heavy and displeased could lend to the possibility of being depressed, but it seems a lot more, the language is stronger in the Septuagint. So that's all for this chapter. So we will do a video on why are chapters 20 and 21 switched in the Septuagint. Does it make more sense in the Septuagint versus the Masoretic? So we're going to do a separate video on that before we wrap up with our final chapter, 1 Kings chapter 22. So thank you very much for your time once again. Until next time, I bid you all Shalom Aleichem, Salamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you, and Maranatha.